Hey there, listeners. Thanks for stopping by to the podcast today. Please, before you're done listening to this episode, leave us a review. If you're on Spotify, you can review now, and you can also review on Apple Podcasts. But if there's any platforms that I'm forgetting about and you can leave us a review, please do so. If you're happening to watch this on YouTube, and if you don't know, you can watch these podcasts on YouTube now, please like and subscribe to the channel and share the episode as well. So thanks for stopping by, everybody, and enjoy the episode.
Stay hungry, stay foolish.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other things, not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
I have a dream. Will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Hello, and welcome back to the Knowledge is Power podcast. I'm your host, Max Willett. Today, we got another great guest. So if you could go ahead and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Hi, I'm Steve DeAngelis. Should I give my occupation and stuff like that?
Sure. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm the Market Center technical trainer for Keller Williams Coastal Realty in Rhode Island. My friend Max Willett invited me to come in to espouse this morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm looking forward to talking to you about your life story. So, like I start off every podcast, I ask you a simple question. Let's just hear your life story. You know, go as far back as you want. And I think that's a great starting point.
Okay. Well, let's see. I was born in Holden, Massachusetts. My family moved back to Rhode Island when I was about 2 weeks old. I have 5 brothers and sisters, so it was a large, noisy family. I'm the fourth in line. Was educated in Providence. I went to school in Providence. Graduated from LaSalle Academy, went off to the University of Rhode Island, where I got my bachelor's degree. Had a wonderful 4-year stint there. Went to work, started my first full-time real job the day after graduation. Went to work for the Providence Journal Company and spent 27 years.
Wow.
Let's see. I left there when I was when I turned 50 years old. The company had been sold and they were reorganizing, and that's when they began, my department had pretty much been eliminated, so there was no need for me anymore. I took advantage of the time and traveled for 2 years, and then came home to settle down and realized that, hey, there's nobody to play with. Everyone I know is working. And a very close friend of mine, well, my job at the Journal, I was the director of research and development. So we were a support department. We supported the advertising department and the news department in product development. One of the products that I developed was this Saturday real estate magazine, which it was kind of funny. For years and years and years, you could not put a picture. You could advertise real estate in the Journal. You could not put a picture in the ad. It was simply solid set agate type. We had heard rumors on the street that the Rhode Island Association of Realtors was going to form a partnership with Homes Magazine and make Homes Magazine their official house organ. And we couldn't do that. We couldn't, we did not want to give up one dime of business. So in going out and interviewing some of the leading realtors in the market, it all boiled down to they wanted pictures. They wanted to put pictures in their ads because they needed to make the phones ring. That's how realtors would get business. So we worked on this, and And the biggest pushback we got was from the classified department saying, oh my God, you can't put pictures in classified advertising. And I kept telling them it's basically a death notice. We put pictures in death notices. It's the exact same system. They finally relented and they agreed to do it. Our first book was 64 pages, which was the maximum that we could print. And the book stayed sold out for months in advance for a number of years because it made the phones ring for people. That's when you started your home search, looking in newspapers. I retired at 50, bounced around for 2 years. One of the people that, one of my real estate friends that helped me develop this product, we were just chatting one day and she said, you know more about this business now than I do. Why don't you come to work with me? And I'm like, gee, that sounds like a good idea. Let me do it. So I went off, took the classes, got my license, called her up. I got my license at the end of January, called her and said, hey, got my license, let's go to work. And her response was, it's wintertime. I'm going to Florida for 3 months. So she's like, I'll see you in April. So she had already connected me with her agency, which was Keller Williams. And so I, walked in the front door and found the team leader and said, here I am, here's my license. Let me at him.
Yep.
Started my formal real estate training there at Keller Williams. About a year into being affiliated with them, Keller Williams unveiled a whole new internet-based marketing platform, which it was your customer relationship management tool. It was your marketing tool. And coming from the Providence Journal, we were a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week operation. We were using email back in 1980 when your email was a little tiny screen about the size of today's cell phone. It was green with yellow letters on it. And that's how, we would be communicating with reporters, all over the country, in fact, all over the world that way. So I was very used to using email, sending files back and forth. We had, when I first went to work at the Journal, this was really funny. The advertiser database was a huge Rolodex. Do you know what a Rolodex is?
I do know what a Rolodex is, yes.
Okay, well, this was a huge one that it just had every advertiser listed in it. And my microphone just fell off the stage. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Yep. So one day, one of the advertising managers, we would have summer interns that would work there, and so the ad manager said to one of the interns, go clean out the database, go clean out the Rolodex, and anyone that hasn't done business in like a year, get rid of them. And then realized later on that day that, well, fully a third of our advertisers would only advertise at Christmas. And they all got, and all their cards were thrown away. And that's when management sat down and said, we need to do a different system. So I was involved in the building of the first online database there. So I knew about how to use and manage an online database. So I was, myself and 2 other agents, we were tagged to teaching everyone else how to do this. Did that for a couple of years, then finally said, okay, I'm tired. I don't want to do this anymore. And then about 3 years later, I went to a regional Keller Williams meeting, and they had this guy come in who was talking about this new system that they were developing. It was going to be a cloud-based system, using artificial intelligence to make predictions for the for business. And it was funny because I was so impressed with what they were talking about. The meeting was in Hartford, and as I was driving home, I called the Verizon store here in Wakefield and said, I need the biggest phone you have, because my little BlackBerry did not have the screen capacity to deal with what we were going to be doing in the future. Stopped at the store, picked up the new phone, went into the office the next morning and said, I want to work on this project. And they said, thank you very much. Here it is. It's all yours. And then I said to myself, what the hell did I just do? So I've been working with, I slowly morphed out of full-time sales and more into technology training, which is what I do now. I still service my old book of clients, but most of my time at the office is now spent showing people how to use the technology to enhance their business.
And you do a great job at it too.
Thank you.
Because you definitely helped me. When I got my license, I had no clue the amount of tools that were available to a realtor if you knew how to use. And the biggest thing is knowing how to use them correctly.
Yeah, I remember that day we were sitting in the conference room and your eyes kind of like popped open when I said, well, if you hit this button, this is what happens.
Well, MLS is just something that a lot of people in the general population who don't have a realtor's license don't realize how useful it is. And it's a great marketing tool as well, because a lot of sellers don't realize, the biggest thing, sure, you want to market to buyers on Facebook and whatnot, but the biggest thing is marketing to other realtors, because they always have buyers.
Well,
and through MLS, that makes it so much easier.
And imagine if you were a realtor in 1980. MLS was a big fat book. And it was sorted by cities and towns. So if you had a client that was looking for, let's say, a 3-bedroom ranch house in Cranston, you started at the first Cranston page, and you went through, and every 2 weeks they would publish a new book, and each office had one, maybe 2 copies of this book. So you're fighting with a ton of other agents to get to get your hands on the book. And you're hoping that someone didn't tear that page out that has the house on it that you need. Thankfully, they figured out a way to put it online, which just increased the value tenfold.
Absolutely.
Of the MLS, because now you could not only just say, I want that 3-bedroom ranch house. You could say, I want that 3-bedroom ranch house, and it's got to have 2 bathrooms. It's going to have a 2-car garage. I want a pool in the backyard. I want, this much square footage. And this is the price range that I'm looking for. And as those types of properties would come on the market, it would send you a notice that, hey, 2 new listings just matched your criteria. And it just made things so much easier. And then they allowed you to have more than one picture. In the old print days, you had a picture of the front of the house. And now you could put in pictures of the rooms. You could put in that $50,000 gourmet kitchen you just installed. You could show, the features of the house. It just brought a whole new dimension to home buying, because now you didn't have to go to the house to see if you wanted to know more information about it. You could look and say, yes, these are the 2 or 3 houses that I need to go inside and see. And on the downside, people began to think that, well, I can do this myself. I don't need to get any help from anybody. But for the most part, it helped all of us, because it gave us a wider exposure of the properties we were listing, and it gave us access to, more listings. I may not be too familiar with listings that are in, let's say, Cumberland, because I don't drive through Cumberland very often. But with the advent of the online system, I could say, oh, here's the house in Cumberland that looks interesting. And I could pull up a map of the property to see exactly where it was located.
Mm-hmm.
And then when Google came out with their roving cameras, I could see pictures of the backyard of the house next door. So I could see, is there a junkyard back there, or is it a nice house? This is a beautiful looking home. What's next door? What's across the street? Without having to actually go into the neighborhood and drive by the property.
Very cool. Well, I think I just want to backtrack a little bit to your career in journalism. Very interesting. I've never, to be honest with you, I've never really met anybody who has been a journalist at a very prominent company like the Providence Journal before. I don't think I've had anybody on the podcast. Sure, I've had people that are in media.
I was not a journalist.
Okay. So you were, I mean, yeah,
I was on the
product
business
development.
side.
You're a product development. Yeah. So, excuse me for that. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So what made you realize that, getting in that industry was the right path for you? Like, when did you realize that?
Well, it was 1980. Unemployment rate was very high. There were not many jobs around. And a friend of a friend called me and said, hey, we're looking for someone for a temporary position. The guy was spearheading this this special project, and he said it's only going to be a summer job. And I'm like, okay, I've had a bunch of job interviews. Nobody's hiring anyone. Let me take this, so I'll have some money to spend as I'm, continuing to look. And it was the Providence Journal, as all newspapers, were always looking for additional sources of revenue. And someone had this idea that I guess the best way to explain it is we were taking magazines out of the post office, and we had our delivery crew delivering them to the subscribers. And we were doing it for free to the magazines, but where we would get paid is we would go to advertisers and say, hey, do you want to put a little insert into Time Magazine or Life or Business? There were 7 magazines we were delivering. So we would get paid. Our money would come from selling advertising inserts into these magazines. It taught me a lot about the post office. Do you know if you stick something in someone's mailbox and there's not a stamp on it, and the mailman finds it, he can pull it out, and the postmaster will charge you postage for that piece of mail, and make you come down to the post office and pick it up and then pay them. But so we started doing that business, and it was really funny because I'm working with 5 other people. The other 4 people were like the children of executives, and we all were supposed to get let go September 1st. And so literally like a week before we're being let go, I got called. Now, we were working in a building. We were not downtown on Fountain Street. We were working in a building over on Harris Avenue in the warehouse district. And I got called into downtown Providence. I'm like, oh, I guess they're going to let me go early. And it was my boss's boss who said, look, we have an opportunity. We have something we'd like you to stick around to do for us. Someone had passed away in the research department, and they needed to they needed to fill the job quickly. And they offered it to me, and it was being a research assistant, and I had no idea what was going on, but I'm like, sure, I'm your man. I understand research. Went home that night and had to do some reading up on exactly what it was, but I was put into the research department. They were doing well. When I first joined the department, what their job was, they would do this. They would do a massive. We used to call them pantry checks. They'd send out 4,000 questionnaires to people, and they'd ask you things like, what kind of laundry soap do you use? What kind of peanut butter, bread, etc. And then they'd take this information and they'd use it to, they'd go to the, let's say they'd go to Ann and Hope and say, okay, you want to, you're selling, these are the products you are selling. This is your market share among those, among those buyers, or, they go to one of the grocery stores. So we were basically developing advertising sales strategies. And we, over the next 2 years, the department slowly morphed into, we started conducting more in-depth research, doing focus groups, doing specialized surveys. And at that point, I had moved up in the department. I was now a senior associate. And we continued to build more skills, where we got to the point where we were started doing product development. Product development before that was basically they tried something, and if it didn't stick to the wall, it disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like my first editorial project was, they were looking to develop a young-oriented lifestyle feature, something that would attract younger people into the newspaper. And so we did a series of focus groups. We found out what the 21 to 30-year-olds were looking for, and we developed a product called Lifebeat, which was basically entertainment news and features. That's where you had the movie ads and all that kinds of stuff, and it highlighted activities geared toward the younger people. And that was so successful, the newsroom suddenly said, hey, we have this resource here, we can build on it. So we would do periodic reviews of existing editorial products, and then give suggestions to the news editors. Maybe you need to change your approach to this, maybe you need to add this. Nobody's really getting much use out of that, so maybe you can modify things there. And then they threw me into a political survey, and it's funny because when you're doing a political survey, you're either loved or someone wants to chop your head off.
Sounds about right.
And it was funny because so we did our first political survey, and I think we Channel 10 was a co-sponsor in it with us. And so we do our first survey, and it was one of the races was Nancy Mayer was running for Congress, and I forget who she was running against. She was running against Jack Reed.
Oh, okay.
Senate seat.
Mm-hmm.
And we did two phases. We went out in like March, and then we went back out again in June. And in the interim, Nancy Mayer was a Republican. The Republican Party spent a ton of money promoting Nancy Mayer. And so and this kind of blew up in some people's faces, but so the teaser went out and said, oh, big news on the Senate race. And I can't remember the guy's name, but he was one of Jack Reed's PR people. And he starts issuing these press releases about how, it's a Republican newspaper, and, look at this, we had brought in a consultant, this consultant, worked on Richard Nixon's campaign in 1962, and, just anything bad he could think of. Well, the big headline was, gee, look, the Republicans spent all this money promoting Nancy Mayer, and she did not move 1 point in the polls.
and wow, that seems like some misplaced anger.
Yes. and and then another time, the governor's race was hotly contested, and we had it was Lincoln Almond, his second term running for governor. And the findings, and Lincoln was a Republican, and the Democrats were spending a ton of money, and it was a very close race. And we released the results, and we said it's a neck and neck race. Well, the chairman of the Rhode Island Republican Party was just like beating on the door, was so upset. Actually demanded a meeting with the publisher and the editor and everybody that was involved in this. And now Rhode Island is a heavily Democratic state.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people don't even, for years, people didn't even look. They walked in, they pulled the Democratic lever, they walked out. So it's very tough when you're doing a survey, you're trying to get a good cross representation of the population. Well, it's very tough to find Republicans because, frankly, there just aren't that many in Rhode Island. And so we would work really hard to find these people so we could get a good representative sample. And this guy's flipping out because, well, you just, obviously you said this because you didn't interview enough Republicans. And I'm trying to explain to the gentleman, look, we could have, we would interview like 500 people. I said, we could interview 5,000 people. The results are not going to change.
Mm-hmm.
And it literally came down to, and this was really funny because election night, of course, everyone's on the front lawn of the State House, and the Channel 10 news anchor actually announced that the Democrat had won, and it was a woman, and I forget her name, but so the news person is with the microphone on the camera, saying, so what does it feel like to be the first female governor of Rhode Island? And of course, the woman is like, we're not sure yet. You might be jumping the gun. They haven't finished the counting. And lo and behold, an hour later, of course, Channel 10 had to retract the story because this woman did not win. Lincoln Almond did creep across the finish line, and we still got all kinds of hell for that too, because, well, the Journal stunted the race.
Yeah,
and and it's so, and I kept telling my boss, don't get us involved in these political surveys because no matter what happens, somebody's going to hate you.
Yeah.
It's one thing to do a consumer opinion survey and say people prefer to shop at Jordan Marsh versus Filene's. Those were old department stores back then. It just makes the loser want to invest more money in their marketing. In a political race, they want to come after you with an axe and a baseball bat.
Yeah. It's absolute craziness. The anger. It's sad too. I've had some politicians on in the past, and that's sort of like, I want to get out of talking to them is, why do you want to run? Like, why do you want, no matter what you say or what you do, somebody's just gonna have pure hatred.
Oh yeah.
And it's just like, I've never like like purely just hating somebody just because of their political opinion is just like wrong, but like people still do it. And I want to know why you're running. Why do you feel like what you're trying to accomplish is worth more than that, or something like that? So it's really interesting to hear their perspectives on that.
Well, and I would always get the question from people, like, well, why does the news media try to, why do they dig so deep into somebody? Why are they trying to sabotage them? And it's like, well, first of all, a good reporter knows when you're lying,
Mm.
and they know when you're hiding something. And that just tells them dig deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if, the good reporters are very keen people. They know when something's not right, and they'll dig to find out what is right. And also, when you have someone who's running for a state office, you want to make sure that the person you're giving this power to is going to do the right thing. That's why they have to dig.
Mm-hmm.
And they're not digging so they can say, oh, we wanted to find out if this guy had any, had a mistress on the side. No, that's not what they're looking for. They're looking to see what the character of that person is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's they don't set out to be vicious.
Mm.
But in the course of their research, in the course of their investigation, maybe some vicious stuff might pop up.
Do you think that's changed in modern times, or do you think it's just misrepresented?
No, I think nowadays, first of all, there's a big difference between a print reporter and a TV reporter.
Mm-hmm.
A newspaper is giving you the facts and letting you make the final decision. Television news used to be that way. People in my age group grew up with Walter Cronkite, 6 o'clock at night, reading you the news on TV. TV news is now, it's editorial.
They're trying to be more entertaining than journalistic.
They're telling you their opinion.
Mm.
And they're portraying their opinion as news.
Mm.
And it's not. A newspaper has stuff with opinion, but that's the editorial page, and it's labeled as the editorial page.
It says opinion.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if it's written by the editorial department, it's editorial. If it's a guest columnist coming in, sometimes maybe the governor might write a piece, or someone, then that's labeled as opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's someone's opinion. It's not the opinion of
the
newspaper.
Okay.
Whereas, you look at television, and the Fox phenomena. They're telling you what they think you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
They're not telling you, here's the facts, here's what's going on. You make your own decision. They're telling you this is bad, and they'll give you the reasons why it's bad, but they won't give you all the reasons why it also might be good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I think news.
Hey there, guys. Sorry to interrupt the episode, but I just wanted to tell you that I got my real estate license in the state of Rhode Island. So if you need to buy, sell, or need help renting a property in the state of Rhode Island, feel free to reach out. Contact me at maxwellwillett@kw.com, or call me at 401-487-4477, and I'd be more than happy to help you. Thanks, guys, and enjoy the rest of the episode.
Is hurting us now.
Yeah,
because with the growth of the internet, you no longer have a filter.
Mm-hmm.
In the oh god, I'm gonna sound like an old person now. In the old days, back in the 80s and the 90s, we used to laugh at television, because the saying was, the story doesn't even hit the desk which is where the editor sits. It comes in the door and it goes out on the air. Whereas in a newspaper, you would write a story, and then an editor goes and goes through the story to make sure and will question facts and want to see proof of the facts and things like that, so that when that piece gets published, at that point in time, it's the honest truth. And then if 2 hours later they find out that something was wrong, they will print what's called a retraction.
Mm-hmm.
You know, on the TV side of the business, that doesn't happen unless someone files a lawsuit.
Mm.
You know, like the 2020 election, you had, you know, all these people on various news channels talking about, oh, the voting machines were fixed, and, you know, Hugo Chavez came back from the dead and you know, was manipulating the votes, and they didn't stop saying that until the two voting machine companies filed lawsuits.
Mm-hmm.
And then they stopped saying it because they're like, oh God, we're on, you know, we're now going to be on the hook for you know, billions of dollars.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, I
what
mean, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, you know, and then you have, you know, anyone now can be a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
You're a publisher.
Yeah.
You know, you're packaging something and you're presenting it on the internet, and people can go and watch and listen, and share it with other people. And you know, there's you're the writer, you're the editor, and you're the publisher.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so you have some people that are very damaging. They're going out and they're spreading false, you know, they're false facts, they're lies, and they're not being stopped. They're unchecked.
Yeah.
You know, and it's hurtful because, you know, people will hear something, you know, people will hear something and they start to believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they start to distrusting everything else. And, you know, that's, you know, in the news world, that's what we're in now.
Mm. Yeah. Sad. But yeah, I think I want to get into more of like the product development side of the Providence Journal. I was really interested to hear you say that because I mean, we're talking about sort of the front line, what people see, what's on TV, what's in the newspaper, but there's a lot of product development that goes on in the background, right?
Yeah.
So could you explain sort of like some of the processes that you would go through? You have an idea. What would the process be from idea to reality?
Okay, so you have an idea. We would then, you know, we would first decide who is the target audience, and then we would do a series of focus groups. And what a focus group is you gather a group of people around a table, and you start to talk about something in that subject. For instance, with the LifeBeat product, you know, we were targeting the 20 to 30-year-olds. So we assembled a couple of groups of 20 to 30-year-olds. You know, you're in a focus group facility, which is basically it's kind of like a police interrogation room. You're sitting at a table and there's a one-way mirror on the wall. And there's people behind the mirror, you know, listening to what's going on. And you start a discussion. You know, you have a moderator, they start the discussion. So Max, when the weekend's approaching, you're looking for something to do, where do you start looking?
You go over my friend's house. I look on my text messages.
Okay, so suppose the text messages don't give you any good ideas of what to do this weekend. What would you do next? And you kind of go through that kind of a conversation, and you go around the table. and then you get so you hear what people like, and then you develop some prototypes, and then you do some more groups, and you say, okay, what do you think of this? And they critique it, and you always have to listen for, and I always called it, you have to listen for the but report.
Mm,
And it was basically someone's like, wow, this is really great, but
yeah, because everything before the word but is
everything before the word but is praising you, but the truth comes afterwards.
yeah,
Yeah, this is really nice, but. And so that tells, and now we would have, editors and reporters sitting behind the mirror so they could hear what's going on. And then towards the end of and the group would run for like an hour and a half, and then towards the end of the group, we'd ask the back room to send in questions. There may be something that, maybe one person mentioned something and somebody in the back really wants to dig in deeper on that. But you'd go through a series of these until you finally got to a product that you could produce and people liked. And then we'd test it. We'd print the product. We'd give it to people and say, would you, actually we would recruit people. We say, we're going to send you, a new newspaper section. Please read it, and we're going to call you Thursday at 7:30 at night and ask you some questions. And then we kind of go through it just as one final check. And then when we cleared all the hurdles and we found, an audience for this product and an advertising base, because somebody's got to pay for it, then we'd go to press and we'd publish it.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think was the most difficult part of that process, of the R&D process?
I can explain it in a quick little story. Someone in the newsroom decided that, we needed a woman's section, but we couldn't, they in the 60s and the 70s, they actually, newspapers actually had sections called women, women or, whatever. And that kind of fell out of favor. And then in the 80s and the 90s, it's like, well, we need something. We're not getting young mothers into the fold. We need to pull them back in. And so we started this concept of a product called Hers, and went through all the steps. And I'm sitting in the back room. I'm sitting behind the mirror with a bunch of editors, and so this one participant, the question, you start a focus group with an easy question that will generate some conversation. And the question was, what's the one thing you'd love to have in your life that would make things so much easier? And one of the women just said, I'd love to have a second bathroom. And we're all like, what the hell is she talking about? And as Anne, who was the moderator, starts to probe on this, well, the woman had 4 children. And every time she wanted to take a relaxing bath, the kids would, Mommy, I got to use the bathroom. Just like they were always disturbing her. And she's like, if I had a second bathroom, I could be soaking in the tub, and it would be that Callaghan Take Me Away TV ad. You're soaking in the tub, the candles are burning, no one's bothering you. And one of the editors, and if she ever hears this, she'll come back and beat me up, was sitting next to me, and she turned to me and said, well, I don't know anybody like that. Where are you finding these people? And I turned to her and I said, well, I won't say her name. You went to Choate Rosemary Hall. and then you went to Harvard University, and you've never known a tough life. And this is the average person out there. You know, they're working, they got kids, life is stressful. You know, I said, you know, you've got a pampered life. To which point she called me all kinds of names. And then after our third set of focus groups, and we had a similar type of reaction, she finally said, "Now I know what you mean." You know, so it's basically you develop an idea, you work the idea, you have people, you know, critiquing, you have your internal group, you know, your peers critique it, then you go out to see what the masses are like. Because while reporters are very smart, you know, reporters are very smart, keen people, they're also pretty much highly educated, and they're well paid. And they're not, you know, they're not facing the struggles of a young mother with 4 children working a minimum wage job. You know, lives are completely different. So that's kind of how that works. Now, just because you made the product doesn't mean you can sit back on your laurels and do nothing else, because people's tastes change over time. So the other thing we would do on an annual basis is we would pretty much do a product review. We would sit down with you and have you go through the paper in a one-on-one interview. And, you know, we'd ask you, what did you look at this paper? What did you, you know, how much did you read? What sections do you just take and toss aside? You know, some people only want the sports section. Some people want everything but the sports section. So the problem that a newspaper faced was they had to have a good balance of everything so that everybody would be satisfied, and nobody would say, "Oh, this is a waste of time because I don't read all this stuff." So you were constantly checking on and improving and tweaking so that your product stayed relevant and interesting and people wanted to read it.
Yeah, interesting. Was there any ideas that you had that you were really excited about but ended up really not working out?
Oh, we've all had explosions in our life.
Yeah.
I had one, and it was funny because I thought for sure I was going to get fired when this was done. You know, newspapers had large circulation departments, and they would have a telemarketing crew that every night would go out and they'd bang the phones and they'd sell subscriptions. And then, you know, people would, you know, they'd offer them, you know, half price subscription for 30 days. And then of course the people would take the 30 days and then they'd drop the subscription. So I had come back from a conference where we were looking at, one of the speakers spoke about, you know, identifying people's habits and classifying, you know, I'm sure have you heard of Myers-Briggs and discs and all those little programs that they typecast you into a personality group?
Not really. I haven't.
Well, you'll be getting them soon. Well,
Okay.
what it is basically it's
Oh, wait, you mean for Keller Williams? We got
Yeah.
the personality test. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
there's a ton of those out there.
Yeah.
And so a bunch of us got together and said, we need to do that for potential subscribers. We need to figure out what their triggers are and what they react to. So we did some intensive research in 7 different markets, and we came down to a list of 25 questions. And so we had our telemarketers going out, and excuse me, it was 15 questions. Well, in their sales pitch, they would ask these 15 questions. And then we would look at the response to those questions and say, we own this person for life. They have to read a newspaper every day. And we'd also say, okay, these people need some extra loving care. We need to work with them to keep them in the fold. So we had developed, we had 5 categories that we would put new subscribers in. And then the second part was, okay, what are the steps? What are the methods? What do we have to do to keep those marginal people in the fold? And that's where things blew up.
Mm-hmm.
We found out that there were people that they wanted the paper for the 30, they wanted it for short-term fix, and then they were done. And nothing you could do would bring them back into the fold until the next time a crisis hit, and then they would come back into the paper. And I think I personally spent about $50,000 out of my budget for this. And I'm like, oh great, I'm going to get called before the controller and the vice president of finance and the publisher and the board of directors, and they're going to just, murder me. And they didn't. And it was funny because, I was really expecting, the axe to fall. And both the publisher and the VP of marketing are like, it was a good effort. What did you learn from it? And as we talked about it, we realized we had learned some good things about our sales tactics to subscribers. And we learned some things that we had to stop doing because they were just, they were costing us too much money and we weren't getting anything from it. And I came out of that meeting and I'm like, oh my God, did I dodge the bullet or what? Because I had really promoted this. I said, we got to get involved in this research. They were like the Atlanta Journal Constitution, the Washington, all these big newspapers were involved in it. And I'm like, we're on the cutting edge of technology here. We got to do this. And it just, flatlined.
Yeah. So the last thing I want to go over a little bit before we tie up and end the podcast is your education.
Okay.
Your college education. So if you could just give, I know you had briefly mentioned where you went to college, but if you could go a little bit more detail about that.
I went to URI.
Mm-hmm.
I majored in political science and economics.
Mm-hmm.
And graduated in 1980. And it was funny because when I first moved into the research department, I'm like, oh no, I got, statistics. Every mathematics class that I had in college was taught by either an Indian professor or a Chinese professor, and their accents were so heavy, they were very tough to understand. So I basically didn't learn anything in statistics. And in market research, you use a lot of statistics. That's how you test your samples, et cetera. And I figured, okay, they're going to figure out I don't know statistics. They're going to just get rid of me. Well, 2 things happened. My boss in the research department was a statistical genius. Absolutely terrified to talk to people, to talk in front of people. So we developed a little partnership here. He was teaching me statistics, and he would do all the deep, in-depth research, in-depth analysis. And I would go out and present it to people because I did not have a problem talking to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so I slowly learned statistics from him. And then he sent me off to this seminar in New York. And one of the instructors was a guy named Stu Tolley. We remained friends for many years after this. Like the lights got turned on and everything made sense. And he all of a sudden I understood how statistical modeling worked, how you did this stuff. And then the journal company sent me off to Notre Dame for a master's degree. And it was a special program. I wasn't on campus full time. And my projects were aligned with my job. So they sent me off and I got my master's in marketing and economics. And then I started doing statistical modeling to forecast business, which was kind of difficult to explain to people. But once they saw the results, then they wanted more done. And of course, growing up on the East Coast and going to school in Rhode Island and going to college in Rhode Island, and then all of a sudden I'm plunked down in the middle of a cornfield in Indiana. It was huge culture shock.
Yeah.
But now that was back in the early 80s, and I'm still maintain friendships with people that I was in school with. But it taught me a lot about understanding numbers and understanding data. And when I came back, and then I was promoted to the manager of the department, one of the things that I had learned in the school was you can teach anyone how to market. Anyone can learn how to market. The books are all over the place. But if a person does not have a good foundation in understanding numbers and how numbers work, they're never going to understand statistics. And they need to understand statistics to drive their marketing programs. And that's kind of what set me off on, when I come back to the Journal as the manager of the department, that's when the Journal started developing a new advertising management system. Now, mind you, all of this was being done on mainframe computers, and mainframes are great. You'd plunk your cards in one side, and you waited till the thing got to process it, and then would spit out your report at the end. And we were looking at, remember that big Rolodex? We wanted to get rid of the Rolodex. We wanted the salespeople to have the information on their desk, available to them all the time. And then we started developing statistical models that would say, okay, you did your advertiser did this, and this. This is the way they should continue. This is what they should do next. And then I got into teaching it.
Yep.
Which was the best part. I actually taught a couple of classes at Johnson & Wales in the graduate school in statistics.
Oh, wow.
And I would walk in holding a slide ruler. And that's what, and the students would freak out because they're like, no, we have these TI-59 calculators. And like, no, this is the way you learn it. It was only a joke. I didn't bother to teach them how to use the slide ruler because that just wasn't happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of people, I want to talk about sort of what you learned through college. A lot of people go into college with different mindsets. They're going to go to party, or they're going to go to learn, or whatever. What was your mindset going into college? And when you graduated the first time from URI, what was the biggest takeaway from college?
When I first went to college, I was amazed at the number of people that I was in class with that did not know how to use a library. They were absolutely lost. And I don't know why, but I had an English teacher in high school that, we had to have a copy of Bartlett's Familiar Quotations, which was basically a big fat book that took all these famous quotations and categorized them and sorted them. And that started it. And then, now mind you, this was before computer databases became very, very popular. But in political science, you have to do a lot of book research, and you need to find news stories and magazine stories and things like that. And these people I was in class with had no idea that there was a thing called the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature. And it was basically a big fat index book that you could go in and you could look up Max Willett, and it would show me every article ever published about you. Or every article you ever published would be listed in there, and a reference on where to find it. That got replaced by the LexisNexis database, which was essentially an online database of magazine and news stories, and you could do word searches, and it would bring up, you could find the stuff. But this was 1980, 1981. If you were a freshman at URI, you got to use the computers. You got to go into the computer center like 3 o'clock in the morning and punch your cards and put it in. And there was no instant online access. I mean, it was just big and clunky. But these kids, call them kids, I was a kid myself, didn't know how to find stuff in the library. I remember there's one girl was like, I can't, I don't know what to do, where to start. And I'm like, go to the damn reference desk. Tell them what you're looking for. They'll find it and give it to you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I'm like, my God, you're in college. You passed all the exams. You made it here. Don't you know how to use didn't you ever go to the library?
Yeah.
And people would like look at you like cross-eyed, like, is that the place where I go to pick up chicks? No, that's the pub. The library is where you go to learn stuff, so you can afford to pick up the chicks.
And then what was the biggest takeaway you had from college? What was the biggest thing you learned?
Well, that's a tough question. I'm going to say it's tolerance for working with a diverse group of people.
Mm-hmm.
You have your set of friends, and you're all similar. But when you're out in the workplace, they're not all your friends. They're not all similar. And when you're in a sales and marketing situation, they're diametrically opposed to everything you're thinking about. So I think the best thing I learned in college was dealing with different groups of people.
Mm-hmm.
And how to not shut them off.
Very valuable lesson. Yeah. So I think it's time we start wrapping up the podcast. I usually end it with this one question, but I want to ask you, Steve, for all of you watching, has a very nice resume. I printed it out. I think it looks great. And at the top of his resume, it has this quote. And this quote is, to advance myself to the fullest and take others along to achieve their destinies. Where did you create that, or is that some famous quote that I've never heard before? But what made you want to put that there? Because that's a really interesting quote.
Although I was raised a Roman Catholic, I enjoy reading the writings of the Dalai Lama.
Okay.
Here's a person who was taken away from his family at like 2 years old and, became the ruler of a nation and a religion. And to this day, he holds no remorse towards anything. And he has some of the most profound writings I've ever read, and some of the most inspiring things I've ever read. So I steal a lot of his quotes.
Well, that's a great quote, and we're sort of going to stay on that track here.
And it's something. I mean, that's something that that's something that I do.
Yeah.
It's because I'm a firm believer in the collective intelligence raises everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You've got, like, in business, you have two kinds of bosses. You have the insecure one that has to beat the hell out of you so that you know that they're better than you, and nothing ever gets done. And then you have the other boss, the other kind of boss that says, okay, you're really good at this, and you're really good at this, and you're really good at that. So let's the four of us sit down and move everybody up, share the knowledge, share the skill sets. Much like, in the agency, when I first started teaching technology to people, I was volunteering. I wasn't being compensated for it. I wasn't being compensated directly, but I knew that if I helped you move up in business and start making sales, then the office becomes profitable, and we have profit sharing. So, there is a little jealousy in there. I want to get some more money, so I want to make sure that everyone can improve themselves. And, it goes along the lines of, you want to leave this place better than when you found it.
Absolutely. And the last thing I end every podcast with sort of ties into this, and it's a simple question, and it's interesting to hear everybody's different perspectives on it. If you were to leave one piece of advice to the listeners, what would that be? Business, life, anything you want it to be, what would that advice be?
The other quote I always use, which isn't from the Dalai Lama: never stop learning.
Absolutely. And you know what I love about that? I'm a big believer in the simple ones, the simple quotes, because I love the stay foolish, stay hungry quote by Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, I talk about him sometimes. Business-wise, I look up to him. I think he's great. One of my favorite movies is the one with Michael Fassbender, because you can see sort of in the beginning of the movie, his family life is horrible, right? Treats his ex-girlfriend and his daughter horribly. They're just a growth that he just wants to get rid of. And as the movie progresses, his relationship with his daughter gets better, and his business gets better. His products get better. And ultimately, at the end of the movie, in 1999, it sort of culminates. He has this really great conversation at the end of the movie with his daughter, and then goes and releases the iMac. You know what I mean? And I don't know, I'm getting off on a Steve Jobs tangent right now, but I can, but I have a picture of him. I mean, like a quote here in my office. But yeah, I think I love those simple, never stop learning. It's simple. It can be interpreted. It tells you what to do in your life. It doesn't tell you how to live your life. You know what I mean? So thank you for sharing that. That's refreshing and a very great piece of advice. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay.
And thank you for coming on the podcast, Steve. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks for inviting me. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, I love having conversations with people, and this is definitely a great one. And thank you all for listening to the Knowledge is Power podcast. Make sure to follow us on Instagram. And, it's a little bit of a conflict of interest. We're both realtors, but if you don't like me, reach out to Steve. If you need to buy a house, I'm sure he could help you out a little bit. But yeah, we're both agents at Keller Williams. Love that brokerage. So thanks again, Steve. And thanks for listening, everybody. And we'll catch you